For legal reasons, several clips featured in this video had to be removed or replaced with stills. Many of the images used are fan-made artwork and are not meant to be taken as official. We apologize for the inconvenience.
As we've discussed many times in the past, children's TV usually has a good amount of hidden depths. However, there are times when things get downright hellish, in ways that not even adult shows can achieve. So today, we're going to be diving deep into the depths of kid shows, and look at the top 30 disturbing moments we could find. Some rules, however. One show per entry, though each entry could have different moments from their show. The shows must be somewhat well known, so no foreign shit. Sorry, Mr. Nosy Bunk. And finally, no anime. With that being said, let's begin. The Ultimate Enemy, Danny Phantom. Despite being a show about ghosts, Danny Phantom rarely ever gets scary. It has its moments here and there, but the ghosts are more often than not played for laughs. Surprisingly enough, the most disturbing moment in the entire series comes from Danny himself. Well, sort of. In the second TV movie, The Ultimate Enemy, shit gets real. 10 years into the future, the Earth is in ruins. The most dangerous ghost of all time is making the lives of the survivors a living hell, and that ghost is the adult Danny Phantom. The episode has a lot of time travel and convoluted explanations for how ghost forms work. Eventually, present-day Danny takes it upon himself to defeat his future self, and learn how exactly he became like that in the first place. It turns out that right after Danny travels into the future, an event takes place that turns him into this demon. This event being an explosion at the Nasty Burger that kills his entire family, as well as Sam Tucker and Mr. Lancer. Danny was then forced to move in with the only person who has a chance of understanding him, his family friend and arch nemesis, Vlad Masters, who is also half ghost. Despite their history, Vlad treated Danny with great sympathy. Unfortunately, it didn't do much good for Danny. He asked Vlad to remove his human half, so he wouldn't have to suffer human emotions anymore. He does so, reluctantly, but now without his human conscience, Danny's ghost form does the unthinkable. He rips Vlad's ghost form out of him and fuses with it. The malice and evil inside of Vlad's ghost form is too much to handle, and it turns Danny into an irredeemable monster.
What happened to my human self?
Some things, my boy, are better left unsaid.
I mean, you can tell how messed up this episode is going to be right from the title card, showing a beaten and bruised up Danny, barely holding up against his shadowy future self. And everything about future Danny is just disturbing, from his transformation scene to his complete lack of empathy. The fact that the main characters we've come to know are just outright killed is another shocking detail that you don't usually see in Nickelodeon shows, or kids shows in general. And this episode was not a what-if plot either. It was very real, and it was close to being the actual reality of the show. After his defeat, future Danny is never seen again. The ending set up his return, but thankfully he never escaped from his eternal prison cell.
Ed's Nightmare, Rocko's Modern Life. In addition to Ren and Stimpy, Rocko's Modern Life is one of Nickelodeon's most surreal and zany shows of the 90s. Jokes and visual humor had little to no consequence, leading to some absolutely fantastic slapstick. But we're not here to talk about funny stuff. Sometimes that surrealness that works in favor of the show's humor can also go a bit too far. In the 10th episode of the series Cabin Fever, the Big Heads go on vacation to a mountain cabin. However, when they get there, they find that Rocko and Heifer rented the exact same cabin, leading them to have to spend the weekend together. As usual, Mrs. Big Head is just fine with this, but Mr. Big Head is 100% not. Eventually, an avalanche occurs, trapping them inside the cabin. Mr. Big Head attempts to dig through the snow later that night, but ends up almost freezing to death. Half awake, Mr. Big Head looks up and sees the three standing around him, morphing into demons.
Are you okay, Mr. Big Head?
Mr. Big Head? Mr. Big Head?
A short, strange acid trip occurs with Big Head turned into a flower and then screaming his eyes out, literally. While this moment is short, it definitely caught many children off guard with its sudden, disturbing nature.
Jackie's father, Batman Beyond. In the 15th episode of Batman Beyond, we are introduced to an original villain named Earthmover, a man made entirely out of dirt. Throughout the episode, Terry's friend Jackie Wallace feels as if she's being constantly watched. Well, it turns out that she is being watched by the titular Earthmover, or at least his dirt henchman. Jackie is sure that the villain is one of her adopted father's enemies. After the attack by the Dirtmen, Jackie's adopted father, Bill, reveals that her real father, Tony, is the villain, and that it's his fault that he became that way. 10 years prior, Bill and Tony started up a company, and had to dispose of toxic waste. However, they could not afford to do it properly, so Bill dumped it into a sealed mine shaft. Tony was reluctant of this, worried that there would be terrible repercussions, but Bill offered him a partnership to gain his confidence. A cave-in occurs, trapping Tony underground with the toxic waste. Thinking that he's dead, Bill adopts Jackie to make up for his mistake. However, the toxic waste caused Tony to fuse with the Earth itself, creating Earthmover. In present day, Bill and Jackie become trapped underground, where they find out what Tony truly looks like.
You can't be, but you are, aren't you? You're him. You're my father.
Yes, Jackie.
And this is what the accident did to you?
Not accident. Not accident.
But Bill said that...
He attempts to kill Bill and take Jackie back, but Batman shows up and saves the day. Another cave-in occurs, killing the Earthmover for good. This episode is not only disturbing for the look of the Earthmover itself, but also the scenario of meeting a long-lost family member who is completely unhinged. The preconceived notion that they'll be whoever you created in your head, being completely shattered, must be a truly terrifying situation to be in. Kudos to the writing team. They could have easily made the adopted father the true villain and have him be a complete asshole. But instead they showed that both sides are both equally in the wrong and in the right.
Bean Matson, All Grown Up. All Grown Up was a weird show. Take the Rugrats, age them up 10 years, and then put them in uncomfortable situations, like watching Tommy try to make it with a girl. It's got nothing on the original Rugrats when it comes to weird and disturbing moments. But we're here to talk about the one time All Grown Up managed to get on that level. This moment comes to us from the two-part episode Interview with a Campfire, in the form of a character called Bean Matson. Bean is a character who appears only in the special and introduces the kids to Camp Everwood, telling the tales of all things scary that supposedly took place at the camp. Tommy finds it the perfect opportunity to create his horror movie, but things get too real when kids begin to go missing. Toward the climax, it's revealed that Bean is no ordinary boy, and is in fact the ghost of a boy who died in 1871 along with other settlers, due to an extremely cold winter. Bean was most likely searching for the souls of other dead settlers, and thanks to Dill and the others, he was finally able to be put to rest, but not before giving them one good scare. At the end of the episode, the gang reviews the footage they took for the horror movie, when a scene shows up that none of them filmed.
Don't never got no brain or nothing.
The scene shows Bean levitating with red eyes saying, "Don't ever got no brain or nothing." I have no idea what that means, but it sure scared the hell out of the Rugrats. Supernatural beings are not really ever mentioned in the Rugrats, the only other one being Lil Q from the All Grown Up Valentine's Day episode. It's a strange moment, and a disturbing one at that. Bean was clearly happy with their help, so I guess he decided to freak them out for shits and giggles.
Dark Harvest, Invader Zim. When it comes to disturbing moments, Invader Zim features them in spades. Our entry from this series is disturbing for two reasons. One taking place in the context of the show, and one in real life. In the episode Dark Harvest, Zim finds that none of his organs resemble that of a human's at all, which causes problems when he gets a case of head pigeons and has to go to the nurse. Realizing that the nurse will discover his alien organs, Zim decides to steal the organs of humans in the school, putting inanimate objects in their place. After stealing the organs of almost every student in school, Zim is now a fat, blobby mess, oozing fluids and intestines, almost bursting at the seams. It's a disgusting and disturbing sight, and it begs the question how Nickelodeon even approved this episode. The subject matter is just so far removed from anything Nick has ever dealt with. It's absolutely bizarre. While the episode is dark and disturbing in its own right, things get even darker when we take a look at Scott Dulesky. On October 15, 2005, Dulesky murdered his neighbor, Pamela Vitali. He was a minor at the age of 16 at the time, so he did not qualify for the death penalty and was instead sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole. During the trial, it became increasingly evident that Dulesky was fascinated with organs and often talked about breaking children's necks and wondering how the human body would function without certain organs. This episode of Invader Zim was brought up during the trial, drawing attention to certain comments he made after watching said episode. However, the two teens that testified stated that he was just joking about those comments, although those same teens also stated that he is not violent, and that's clearly false. So could this episode of Invader Zim have actually inspired a real-life murder? It's hard to say without any conclusive evidence, but it's entirely possible that it didn't help if those ideas were already present in Dulesky's mind.
Man-Bat transformation, Bane gets too much venom, and the Joker venom, Batman the Animated Series. Batman the Animated Series is well known for being incredibly mature and treating its audience with respect and integrity. Some heavy themes are addressed in the show, and its willingness to never speak down to kids is one of the reasons why it has become, in the eyes of many, the definitive animated version of the Caped Crusader. Of course, and not shying away from more mature and dark themes, some disturbing moments naturally come with the territory. Given how many there are throughout the series, we will be focusing on 3 of them as opposed to just one. The first of these moments comes to us from the episode On Leather Wings. In this episode, we are introduced to the Man-Bat, a creature who is being mistaken for Batman. Man-Bat is actually a researcher named Kirk Langstrom, who was transformed into the creature after an experiment researching bats as the next evolutionary step went wrong. When Kirk reveals who he is to Batman, he then transforms right before his eyes, complete with demonic laughing, close-ups of his teeth, and his body changing while his clothes rip off to reveal his new terrifying form. The next moment is about Bane, from the episode, well, Bane. This episode introduces us to the titular character, the man who vows to break the bat. If you are aware of Bane, then you know he uses chemically engineered venom in order to become super strong. Well, in the climax of the episode, Batman breaks Bane's venom tube, causing an obscene amount to enter his bloodstream. This is far too much for him to handle, and his muscles grow to a grotesque size. All the while his veins and eyes are popping out while he screams in pain. Thankfully, Batman unplugs the tubes, but for a moment there, it seemed like we were about to witness an overdose on screen. Our last moment comes from the episode The Laughing Fish, in which the Joker unleashes a toxin into the Gotham City harbor that causes all the fish to mutate into a Joker fish with a big toothy smile. Turns out the chemical is non-lethal to humans, and the Joker simply wishes to trademark the fish and gain a percentage over all that are sold. A worker at the harbor tells the Joker that fish cannot be trademarked since they are a natural resource, to which the Joker responds with a threat. Later on, the Joker follows through on that threat and sends a toxic gas into the home of the worker. Upon breathing it, the worker begins to chuckle, which slowly grows and grows into an insane laugh, reminiscent of the Joker. Despite the deranged smile on his face, you can tell by the look in his eyes how much pain he's in. Batman shoots him with an antidote, but the image will forever be burned in our skulls. Exactly how much pain is the Joker actually in? We will never know. And maybe that's for the best.
The Tapeworm, Mr. Meaty. One time, Nickelodeon made a show comprised entirely of ugly puppets selling meat to equally ugly puppets. It was titled Mr. Meaty and featured two teenagers, Josh and Parker, who worked at the titular fast food restaurant, getting involved in all kinds of shenanigans. The show was not received well, especially by vegetarians and parents who did not appreciate the abundance of meat and gross-out humor. The network received many petitions to end the show, which may have played a part in its ultimately short existence. Despite that, it managed to introduce a gross amount of disturbing moments during its 2-season run. The most infamous being the tapeworm in the episode Mooch Master P. The episode starts with Parker mooching off of Josh's lunch, much to his annoyance. He continues to mooch off of everyone in the food court until he has earned the title the Mall Moocher. He eventually stoops to the low level of eating the raw burgers they plan on serving to customers. However, strange things begin occurring after eating the raw burger. Parker finds that food is disappearing right before his eyes, before he can even eat it. He's unable to deliver food orders either, as those disappear into thin air. Josh records Parker trying to eat and then plays it back in slow motion, revealing that an enormous tapeworm is now living inside of his stomach, thanks to the raw burger he ate. The two get the tapeworm out, yanking it from Parker's stomach and into his arm, where it writhes around chaotically. Afterwards, an Australian man comes up and asks to buy it for a zoo. The boys agree, they hand it over to him, and then the man swallows it whole.
That's the stuff!
Ew.
What the fuck?
The Doll Factory, Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated. Despite being named Wrath of the Krampus, this is not a Christmas episode of Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated. Talk about a missed opportunity. What it is, however, is a disturbing romp through an abandoned doll factory, which by cartoon laws require to be unnecessarily terrifying. Shaggy calls it uber creepy, which is an understatement given that the factory is full of ultra-realistic dolls, clashing with the show's simple and cartoony art style. With their hollow eyes and dry red paint blotches resembling blood, the dolls leave a scary but short impression, until their heads start turning and they begin talking, because then they leave a terrifying and lasting impression. It's unclear why or how these dolls spoke, but given the existence of the supernatural in this series as opposed to the original, the dolls could actually be possessed. If there's one thing people don't want going into a Scooby-Doo episode, it's eyeless, rotting baby dolls.
The Alien Invasion, Ed, Edd and Eddy. In one of a few half-hour-long specials of Ed, Edd and Eddy, titled The Eds Are Coming, Jimmy has a nightmare where aliens attack the cul-de-sac, and actually takes a whole area away. Hearing the premise, and knowing the nature of the show, one might assume that the nightmare is very comedic, with the stereotypical little green men aliens invading with ray guns. Instead, however, we are treated with a massive buzzsaw slamming down out of nowhere. A hellish purple vortex rips open the sky, sending down many more of these buzzsaw, with the menacing spiked mechanical tentacles swooping down and capturing a terrified Sarah. Jimmy, now bruised and beaten, desperately attempts to reach Sarah, but falls into one of the newly formed crevices, hanging on for dear life. The two attempt to reach out to one another, screaming each other's names, but it's of course no use. Jimmy's grip weakens, and he falls to his death. While it is another case of, oh, it's just a dream, this nightmare actually traumatizes Jimmy into having PTSD flashbacks to it throughout the episode.
A postcard! I love postcards! Take my hand, Jimmy!
This is amplified with Johnny's claims that there are actually aliens at the cul-de-sac, and that they are at Rolf's house. Things get even freakier when they find a glowing green meteorite at the playground, and a hand pops out of it. The hand turns out to be Ed's, who claims that the aliens experimented on him. They tried to sacrifice Naz to the aliens, who in the end turned out to be just Rolf's weird family. So, no harm, no foul. Or is it? At the very end, the aliens from Jimmy's dream are seen carrying the cul-de-sac away. Just who or what is Rolf's family actually?
Teeth for Two, CATDOG. In the episode Teeth for Two from CATDOG, we get treated to a quick and nasty scene featuring everyone's favorite gross out gag in animation: skinned, bloody cats. In this episode, the two go to the dentist and discover that if one doesn't take care of their teeth, it's the others that is affected. Dog eats disgusting amounts of junk food and never brushes, yet it's Cat who gets all the cavities. Cat tries to get Dog to take care of his teeth so he won't suffer anymore, but it's no use. Dog won't listen. They fight, chewing on things like aluminum foil to hurt each other's teeth. That hurts just thinking about it. Later that night, Cat tries to brush Dog's teeth while he's asleep. Instead of simply moving over to Dog and opening his mouth, Cat decides to pull himself through his skin and out of Dog's mouth. Upon waking up, Dog shares the same reaction all of us would have, and is terrified. Fear turns to anger, and he swallows Cat back into his own skin, and the two engage into another food war, sabotaging each other's teeth. CATDOG is a strange concept for a show that just barely scratches the surface of all the weird and disturbing shit the two of them are capable of. This is one of those things that we wish stayed under the surface.
Terror Toad, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. Rarely do the monster costumes in Power Rangers ever give off a creepy or disturbing vibe. They're usually unintentionally funny, if anything else. Well, Terror Toad is both funny and disturbingly creepy. In the 12th episode of the original series, titled Power Ranger Punks, the evil Baboo slips a potion into Kimberly and Billy's drinks, essentially drugging them into becoming pompous douchebags. While these two are out of commission, Rita Repulsa creates a new monster to finish off the remaining Rangers, the Terror Toad. The unnerving thing about Terror Toad is not only its unsettling design, but also the fact that he eats the Power Rangers and shows their faces on his stomach. The way he devours the Rangers is so disturbing and grotesque. The disgusting use of his teeth and the gagging noises he makes don't do the scene any favors either. After eating both the Yellow and Black Ranger, the Red Ranger is forced to face the Terror Toad, alone. Thankfully, Alpha and Zordon are able to cure Kimberly and Billy, allowing them to morph back into the Pink and Blue Rangers to assist Red in his fight. Zordon informs them that in order to defeat the Terror Toad, they must cut off his horns and then attack the weak point on his neck.
You're going to pay for this, and I'm going to start with you!
Pink Ranger shoots arrows into his throat, freeing the other Rangers, and in one final attack, they kill him by shooting an arrow in his mouth. The episode ends with them playing an innocent game of volleyball at the rec center. Talk about a tonal shift. Terror Toad never appears again, thankfully, with the exception being in flashbacks. He was also the third monster to never be enlarged by Rita's magic wand.
One of Us, Jimmy Neutron. Season 3 of Jimmy Neutron was where things started to get weird. Not that it wasn't weird before, the movie had a giant alien chicken dragon for fuck's sakes. But the tone of the show for its final season got weird, even by its own standards. One moment in particular that highlights this tonal change is in the episode One of Us. The episode starts with Sheen telling Jimmy and Carl about a new show that he's been watching called The Happy Show Show, and they all should watch it because it'll make them happy. Jimmy ignores it and goes to do some weird prepubescent stuff on his computer, like Photoshop him and his crush's heads into wedding photos. However, Sheen is relentless and will not stop bothering Jimmy to watch the show. Soon enough, Jimmy starts noticing that everyone is acting different, being uncomfortably friendly with one another.
Libby, did you just turn some music off? Hello, Jimmy. I'm happy to see you. Did you watch the Happy Show last night?
His crush, Betty, convinces him to give it a go. So that night he turns it on and is greeted by a kindly old woman named Grandma Taters. He watches 10 seconds of it before turning it off because it's just that bad, and quickly puts it out of his mind. The next day at school, all the kids are desperately trying to get Jimmy to give it another chance. Betty asks him to come over and watch it with him. But as he heads over to her house that night, he sees her watching through the window and realizes that the show is hypnotizing people. Soon, the entire town is after Jimmy, trying to force him to watch the show. Luckily, Cindy, who just returned from a karate competition, has not been affected yet, so the two track down Grandma Taters to put an end to this. After defeating her, it's revealed that she's an alien, and there's actually multiple Grandma Taters.
We'll be back.
The Happy Show Show is actually a parody of a real-life Taiwanese children's show called Fruity Pie, which is a bit uncomfortable to watch in itself, but it is ultimately harmless. Nevertheless, it's unnerving to think of such an innocent show brainwashing people like this.
Jesse's nightmare and Michelle's nightmare. Full House. If there's one show that definitely doesn't belong anywhere on a disturbing moments list, it's Full House. The show is a living, breathing Hallmark card that doesn't seem to have a hint of malice or darkness anywhere in it. Well, despite all of that, it's on here for a reason, and those reasons are in the episodes My Left and Right Foot and The 7-Month-Old Itch Part 1. Both of these moments can be quickly explained away since they are dreams and therefore don't actually happen, but that doesn't take away how freaky they are. First up, we have Jesse's nightmare in the 7-month itch part 1. Jesse is annoyed by everyone being in his personal bubble and asking too much of him. Later that night, he has a nightmare where 2 Michelles enter the room and start demanding that he feeds them and changes their diaper. This was at a time in the series when Michelle didn't talk, so she was dubbed by Dave Collier, putting on an uncomfortable, squeaky voice.
Change me! Feed me! Change me! Feed me! Feed me! Change me! Feed me! Change me! Feed me! Change me! Feed me!
Oh my God, there's 2 Michelles. They're multiplying!
The rest of the family then shows up, making annoying and ridiculous requests with a fisheye lens camera focusing on their faces, distorting them and making them look very unsettling.
Help me with my homework.
It's your turn. You're their uncle. We could be so happy.
Change me! Feed me! Change me! Feed me! Change me! Feed me!
Our second nightmare comes in my left and right foot, where Michelle starts to get self-conscious about how her feet are growing larger. We're then treated to a nightmare where her feet grow to a ridiculous size on screen, accompanied by a gross stretching noise. The feet continue to grow until they're the size of the entire room. The family is terrified, and the only reasonable thing they can think to do is tickle them. Michelle wakes up screaming, thankful that it was just a dream. She pulls away her covers to see that her feet are still enormous, much to her horror. Thankfully, that was a dream too.
The Walrus, PINGU. The Walrus is a very mysterious character, only appearing once in the entire series in the episode Pingu's Dream. Throughout his dream, the Walrus follows Pingu in what he thinks is a playful manner. To Pingu, however, this is very frightening and upsetting, given the size and demeanor of the Walrus. When Pingu meets the Walrus at first, he pops up from the scenery abruptly, snorting with a deep voice. He traps Pingu under an igloo and then stretches and squeezes him for his amusement. Afterwards, he takes Pingu's mattress and starts eating it. Why he eats the mattress is beyond us. After slowly walking away, Pingu then books it and runs until he slips and falls down an icy slope. He falls and falls until he reaches his bedroom floor. Turns out, the slope was just his bedsheets. Pingu's mother then coddles him as he sobs and tells her all about his terrifying dream and the walrus that stalked him. The walrus is a disturbing character thanks to his mostly silent demeanor. He is either staring uncomfortably with his dead, black eyes or childishly snorting when he takes his playful jokes too far. He also has strangely realistic human teeth in place of tusks, not helping the situation. The walrus was so uncomfortable for children that the episode was actually placed on an unofficial ban from broadcast distribution. It was removed from British television in 2003 and was pulled from airing in the United States. It also was never released on VHS in the UK. Despite the censorship, it did manage to air once on PBS Kids Sprout in 2006. There was actually an earlier version of this episode that featured the walrus roaring and making disturbing squealing noises. This was changed to laughter because of how frightening the noises were to children. To end this entry off, here's an uncomfortable scene of the walrus speaking German in the creator Ottmar Guttmann's show reel.
Schauen Sie sich mal da haben Sie Modul und Designs und so weiter und so fort. Da habe ich zwar schon mal gesagt, nur die Spezialisten, die wir da verstehen Sie.
Zombie Grandpa, Hey Arnold. In the episode Part-Time Friends of Hey Arnold, both Arnold and Gerald decide they need part-time jobs and decide to start working together at Miss Vitello's flower shop. At first, the boys are delighted to be working together, thinking of all the fun they'll have. However, soon Miss Vitello gets injured and leaves Gerald in charge of the store. Arnold finds that Gerald is far better friends than he is boss, and they begin to fight. Arnold quits, and the two vow to never speak to each other again. Later that night, Grandpa Phil tells Arnold about how he and his friend Jimmy Kafka had an argument when they were kids, and led to them never speaking again. The words haunt Arnold all throughout the night, eventually leading to a nightmare. In the nightmare, Arnold and Gerald run into each other on the bus 70 years later. The two still won't talk to each other, but have forgotten why they even started fighting. Suddenly, the distorted voice of Grandpa Phil taunts Arnold from the back of the bus, saying, "What did I tell you, short man?" We see the disgusting, rotting corpse of Grandpa Phil, laughing at Arnold until his jaw falls off.
I tell you, short man.
What the hell? Why did that need to be there? It certainly does its job by scaring Arnold into forgiving Gerald and helping out with the shop, but why is Zombie Grandpa such a dick? And why is he on the bus? Where is he going? I guess we'll never know. Frankly, we shouldn't know.
The Haunted House, Samurai Jack. It's difficult to classify if Samurai Jack truly is a kid's show or not. The first 4 seasons aired on Cartoon Network, and while it was violent, it was never too much to cross over into the adult territory. Of course, Season 5 changed all that with blood, swearing, and other adult themes, airing exclusively on Adult Swim. Given the more subdued tone of the first 4 seasons, though, and the fact that many children watched it, this moment from the Season 3 episode Jack in the Haunted House deserves to be on the list. While alone at night, Jack encounters a sobbing little girl. She runs away as he approaches her, and he follows her to an old house. While in the house, Jack experiences several visions of the people who once lived there and the monster that attacked them. Jack soon finds the girl and suggests they leave, but then finds that all the doors and windows have disappeared. With nowhere to go, the two decide to rest. When he wakes up, he finds the girl missing and hears music and chatter in the distance. He enters a well-lit room and finds the girl sitting around a table with the other family members. At first, Jack is wary, but is soon calmed by tea and small talk. The facade doesn't last for long, though, as the brother's eyes roll up slowly into his skull. The music becomes distorted and flashes of the room's true state of dilapidation begin to seep in. The brother hunches backwards and begins drooling excessively. The mother and father then do the same. A shadowy substance bursts out of their mouths, destroying their bodies and turning into a demon. In the end, Jack defeats the demon and sets the family members free, but that happy ending does not erase the horrific tone and setting for the majority of the episode. Everything in this episode feels off, from the lack of background music to the way the demon is animated. The fact that we never learn who or what the demon is, or where it came from, is equally unsettling. Unlike Aku and the other villains, the demon is given absolutely no comedic moments.
Count to 10 with nobody. Sesame Street. Most shows on this list have been aimed at kids around the age of 10. While still children, they are capable of handling scary moments from time to time. But what about a show aimed at preschoolers like Sesame Street? The character Limbo, also often referred to as Nobody, was a Muppet who disappeared almost as abruptly as he was introduced. He is made up of 2 floating eyes and a mouth over a black background, speaking with a deep and calm voice.
That's 10. Once again, let's count to 10.
In Sesame Street, he appears to teach children about counting. He wasn't initially created to be on that show. Jim Henson originally created Limbo for his surreal short film titled Limbo: The Organized Mind.
Let me show you how it's done, in case you want to try it. Now, when you first come to the brain, you have to pass through the medulla oblongata. That's where things like breathing and the heartbeat and glands are controlled.
Where the character talks about the human subconscious over images of fog and cockroaches. Why he made the switch to Sesame Street is beyond us. Maybe Henson doesn't want his puppets to go to waste. It is pretty cool. I, however, do not think that this is something that 2-year-olds want staring into their souls.
The Mask, Goosebumps. I suppose with a series like R.L. Stine's Goosebumps, some scary and disturbing moments come with the territory. However, the events that occur in the episode The Haunted Mask are notable for being that episode. Every series has one, the one episode that fucks you up, even if you're already expecting something scary. Based on the 11th book in the series, The Haunted Mask is a 2-part episode that follows Carly Beth, a girl who is sick and tired of being seen as timid and scared. With Halloween coming up, she refuses to wear the cute duck costume her mother made for her, and instead looks for something truly terrifying in order to get back at her friends and anyone else who has made fun of her. At a mysterious costume store, she finds an absolutely grotesque mask that she is certain will scare the fuck out of her friends. The creepy storekeeper won't sell her the mask, but to be fair, he does offer her a gorilla mask. But she ends up stealing it and running out of the store. After she puts it on to scare her brother, she finds that it takes a while to get the mask off her face. She also finds that the mask has made her voice more grisly and menacing. The more and more she puts on the mask, the more it begins to take over her body. She becomes a completely different person while wearing the mask, and even attacks her own friends. Eventually it gets to the point where she cannot take off the mask at all, as it has fused with her face. She goes back to the costume store, but the shopkeeper says that removing it is no use. Only an act of true love can remove the mask, and she's running out of time.
You'll awaken them.
What's happening? What are they doing?
Run! Run!
A bunch of other disgusting masks in the shop begin floating in midair and then chase her out to a nearby cemetery. She then realizes that the act of true love that can remove the mask is the equally ugly and disturbing mold of her head that her possibly psychotic mother made for her. You know, because love, I guess? Earlier that evening, she buries it in the same cemetery that the masks have chased her to. Long story short, she exhumes her replica head, and apparently it's so fucking creepy that the evil, floating, disembodied masks that are chasing her get scared off. Her own mask then comes off and Carly throws the abomination near the door, instead of fucking burning it. Her brother gets his hands on it and puts it on, and the horror begins anew. Having something cling onto your face is not a pleasant thought, especially if it's something that slowly takes over your body. Masks in general are made of latex, smell gross, and irritate the skin. Imagine one stuck on you, sucking the life out of you. That's probably the furthest thing from a pleasant thought as you can get.
Boris and Linka's drug addiction. Captain Planet. Despite being brought up in previous videos on this channel, it would be criminal to not talk about the episode Mind Pollution from Captain Planet on this list. This episode feels so real compared to many of the other entries on this list due to how it mirrors the fears many of us have about our friend, family members, or anyone that you know that has suffered through an addiction. A villain named Verminous Scum is selling a highly addictive drug called Bliss, and Linka's cousin Boris becomes addicted to it. While Bliss is a made-up drug, it's a simple pill that one takes, making its connection to real-life drugs evident.
Nothing can bring you down now.
Boris becomes agitated and arrogant and eventually slips a pill into Linka's food, causing her to become addicted as well. Eventually, the Planeteers have to fight off a bliss-addicted crowd, desperate to do anything that Scum says for more bliss.
Linka, stop taking that stuff! It's poison!
Oh no, Wheeler. I need bliss. Without it, you cannot imagine the pain. I need more.
During the chaos, Scum gives Boris a whole bottle of bliss in exchange for killing the Planeteers. He promptly downs half the bottle and overdoses, dying almost immediately.
Bliss killed him. I'm sorry. No, you are lying. Boris, it's me, Linka. Wake up!
Linka, he's dead.
No, no, no! Oh, Wheeler!
While most of the commentary about drug addiction can be a bit on the nose, as is the way with many PSA episodes of older cartoons, the parallels to real-life drug addiction is rather haunting. Seeing a main character like Linka become pale, with sunken cheeks and baggy eyes is disturbing and upsetting. Bliss seems to be related the closest to meth, given its immediate addictive appeal and giving the user its effect of feeling no pain, at least for a little while. The Bliss users are able to smash windows with their bare fists and feel nothing, similar to the adrenaline rush of meth. I'm sure this episode did the trick and prevented many kids from taking drugs after seeing Boris die.
Frybo, Steven transforms into cats, and the Cluster from Steven Universe. Steven Universe is a show known for pushing the boundaries of what is commonplace in animation. But with that, we see the darker side, the more disturbing and terrifying aspects. In the episode Keeping It Together, we are introduced to gem mutants, hunks of cracked gems crudely put together and forced to fuse. When they take on the physical form, they appear as a deformed, disgusting creature, looking for more gems in order to complete themselves. Upon seeing them for the first time, Garnet has an emotional breakdown, stating that
they were forced together. They were forced to fuse. This is wrong. I'm sorry.
No, Garnet! You're coming undone! Garnet!
So yeah, essentially, rape. This is increased tenfold later when we meet the Cluster, the final product of the gem mutants. This is made up of thousands and thousands of broken gems at the center of the earth. They are constantly in pain, screaming and arguing eternally. So moving away from moments that are showing the darker sides of social elements, there are a few moments that are just downright scary in their own rights. In the episode Frybo, we get treated to the character, well, Frybo. The fast food mascot was creepy enough already, but then it becomes sentient. It grows veins and tentacles and begins force-feeding people French fries. When attacking or in pain, the noises he makes are just downright demonic. Thank God we haven't seen him since season 1. Last, but certainly not least, are the cat fingers. In this episode, Steven tries to hone in on shape-shifting abilities by turning into a cat. Since he is still pretty new at this, he is only able to turn his fingers into cats, at first. Things get out of control, and the cats begin growing out of every bit of his body. Eventually, he becomes nothing but a blob of cat mass.
Steven? Dad! Help! The cat fingers are taking over my body!
I mean, yeah, it's a little silly, but the thought of being consumed by anything, even cats, is just disturbing. Even Steven sounds mortified. Since then, Steven hasn't really messed around with shape-shifting anymore, and that's probably for the best.
Speed Demon, Powerpuff Girls. As we covered much earlier in the list with Danny Phantom, seeing an alternate terrifying future of a show that you're familiar with is not a good feeling at all. Such is the case in the episode Speed Demon of the Powerpuff Girls. The episode begins innocently enough, with Buttercup waiting for the school day to be over, so she can finally go on vacation with the other girls and the professor to the Bahamas. The school day ends with the 3 girls racing out as fast as they can. Buttercup challenges the other girls to a race home, which becomes incredibly intense. They finally make it to the lab and go in, but inside they find an old and miserable Professor Utonium.
Sugar, spice, and powdered rice. No, darn, why didn't I write it down?
He is desperately attempting to create a new set of Powerpuff Girls, but without success. Upon seeing him, he chases them away, calling them nothing but hallucinations. After running from the lab, the girls find that all of Townsville has become a desolate wasteland. They go to the town hall to find an old and insane Miss Bellum, mourning over the now dead mayor. Upon getting close to her, she yells at them to get out, stating that the mayor is hers. Next on their stop is the kindergarten, where they find an old and senile Miss Keene, who waves endlessly, repeating the same sentence over and over. The girls find out that they have been transported 50 years into the future. A menacing laugh looms over them, the one and only laugh of him. He explains that they went forward in time, and the whole world went to heck. The girls take out their anger by beating the ever-loving shit out of him, but it doesn't even faze him. He just gets back up like nothing happened. He then grows to a monstrous size, showcasing his dominion over the post-apocalyptic Townsville. Soon all the zombified and senile citizens of Townsville come out, chanting, "You did this," surrounding the girls. Him states that he simply took over, but it was the girls who abandoned them. The chanting and music get louder and louder until the girls cannot simply take it anymore and run away as fast as they can. Thankfully, they find themselves back in their own time, with everyone back to normal. The girls rush to tell the professor everything that happened. He then comes to the realization that Townsville cannot survive without the girls, not even for a week in the Bahamas, and thus, the day is saved and the vacation is cancelled. This episode is just very upsetting, given its mood whiplash from the rest of the series, and seeing all these characters that we know and love becoming old shadows of their former selves. It wasn't just a dream either. This was a very real experience.
Giant Evil Baby, Mr. Friend, I'm Not Tommy, Rugrats. As we mentioned earlier in the video, Rugrats is full of disturbing moments. Given that the series is shown in the eyes of babies, it makes sense that the world we see can be frightening and unusual, as babies don't have the knowledge and sense of the world that we adults do. Having said that, there are some fucked up things in this series that would make even adults lie awake at night. That's why we're looking at a few choice scenes from the series, since there were just too many to choose from. First up, from the episode Angelica's Worst Nightmare, we were treated to the worst thing Angelica's imagination can muster up: a new baby brother.
So you're the new baby, huh?
That's right. I'm the new baby. I'm the new baby and you're the old baby, see? And you better get something straight right off the bat. There ain't room in this house for the both of us.
But this baby is a massive, drooling, and obnoxious tyrant who ends up eating her. Yikes.
I wonder what a toy car would taste like.
No, please! I'm your big sister!
Well, now you're num-nums.
Next up, we have the mysterious Mr. Friend, which featured the titular Mr. Friend, an animatronic clown robot that Stu designs as a toy for the babies. Unfortunately, like any normal child, they are terrified of Mr. Friend, and so were we, the audience. Not only is one of these hellish dolls bad enough, soon enough there were tons being developed in the basement. A massive battle scene takes place where the babies fight like hell to decimate the robot clowns, finally laying Mr. Friend to rest. However, one survives and finds its way to Angelica, who finds him fun and exciting. Match made in hell, it seems. Lastly, perhaps the most infamous disturbing moment in Rugrats comes to us from the episode In the Dreamtime. In this episode, Chucky is having trouble distinguishing reality from his nightmares. While in one of his nightmares, a confused Chucky asks Tommy what's going on.
Hey, Spike's not supposed to talk. What's going on, Tommy? I'm not Tommy.
This moment terrified a generation of children and resulted in nightmares galore. And if that wasn't enough, they bring back the scene at the end with a fake Stu.
Stu, I didn't know you were coming over.
I'm not Stu.
Talk about overkill. Rugrats was always very good at nailing the feeling of a fever dream, from the disturbing moments such as in this episode to the more serene, like in the episode Slumber Party.
Clown Nurses, Lemongrab Eats Lemongrab, and The Deer from Adventure Time. Adventure Time is bizarre, to say the least. It is definitely one of the most influential cartoons in the past decade, for sure, and that's due in part to its unique sense of humor. That sense of humor is often very weird, dry, and messed up, and sometimes it can go a bit too far and end up in the more disturbing territory, where you question if this was meant to be funny or pure nightmare fuel. We'll be looking at a few moments as opposed to just one, because there's just too many to pick from. The first moment comes from the episode Another Way, where Finn is treated by some clown nurses after he breaks his toes. Surprisingly, the clown nurses are fucking terrifying, and state that smooches are the only way to cure him. We get a nasty, seizure-inducing close-up of the clown nurses laughing, stating that it's the only way.
It's the only way. Let me go! Huh? It's the only way. Whoa!
Yeah, this episode didn't really do clowns any favors. Our second moment comes from the episode Another 5 More Short Graybles, which is, more or less, a series of short stories strung together with one overarching theme. One segment revolves around Lemongrab and his brother Lemongrab 2 arguing over what their toy lemon doll should do next. Lemongrab 2 thinks he should go to bed, while Lemongrab 1 thinks he should dance. After a struggle, the doll breaks, and Lemongrab 1 freaks out.
Only
My end table.
That's literally how it ends. Finally, we have the eerily titled episode, No One Can Hear You. Throughout the episode, candy people are disappearing left and right. A conflict between Finn and Jake arises, causing Finn to believe that Jake has been kidnapping the candy people to use as a birthday surprise for him. After finding the missing candy people in the sewer, however, Peppermint Butler explains that Jake is not the one who did this.
I'm so sorry.
You did not do this, Jake.
What? Then who did?
It was him.
It turns out that the true culprit was this deer.
Free deer!
The look on this deer's face is the very essence of stranger danger. It's terrifying. The two defeat him, and Princess Bubblegum reveals that the deer just wanted their sugar, but she didn't give any.
Tom and Jerry commit suicide. Tom and Jerry. This is a moment we've talked about time and time again, and for good reason. Despite its age, it is held up as one of the most disturbing moments in cartoon history. In the episode Blue Cat Blues of Tom and Jerry, the episode starts right off the bat with Tom sitting on the railroad tracks, waiting for death. Jerry watches from a bridge above, knowing that when he gets home, his friends will ask why he didn't try to stop him. Well, Jerry believes that it's better this way. We get treated to a flashback where we see Tom falling for a beautiful white cat. The two begin going out and everything seems great. That is until she meets Mr. Butch, a much wealthier cat. She leaves Tom and immediately goes with Butch, leaving Tom heartbroken and Jerry in a state of, I told you so. Tom desperately tries to win her back, buying her gift after gift, but it's no use. Butch's gifts are far nicer and fancier. Heartbroken and broken in general, Tom falls into a deep depression and begins to drown his sorrows in milk, treated much like alcohol here. Jerry begs for him to stop, but Tom lets himself go down the gutter, literally. Jerry resuscitates him, but as soon as he wakes up, he sees his former girlfriend and Butch driving by in a car that says, "Just married." And so we're left back where we started, with Tom sitting on the railroad tracks. Jerry thinks to himself about how his own girlfriend would never do such a thing, as she's always been faithful. Well, just then, his girlfriend drives by with another mouse in a car that also says "Just married." Jerry goes down to the tracks and joins Tom, waiting for death. The episode ends as we hear a train whistle getting louder and louder. What a dark and disturbing subject for an episode. Suicide and depression is not something you'd think to ever associate with Tom and Jerry. But yet here it is, a full episode dedicated to it.
Wormy, from SpongeBob SquarePants. Oh God, does this one always freak me out. How can you terrify a bunch of children just in a few seconds? Easy, just throw in a little bit of reality and you're golden. In the Season 2 episode Wormy, SpongeBob and Patrick take care of Sandy's pets while she's out of town. The two then meet the titular Wormy, who they find to be the most precious goddamn thing on Earth. After having an amazing day with Wormy, the two leave for the day, and overnight, Wormy goes through metamorphosis, revealing that he's no worm at all, he's a caterpillar. The two return the next day and find this disgusting, horrifying creature sitting over Wormy's corpse, which is really just his empty cocoon. The butterfly escapes the jar and lands on SpongeBob's glass helmets, where we get a nice close-up. And then another one. And then again. It turns out the footage for the close-up of the butterfly wasn't a butterfly at all, but rather a horsefly taken from an episode of Bill Nye the Science Guy, where he discusses how insect compound eyes work. Just something about close-up bugs really freaked me out, and the fact that it happens over and over again in this episode is just terrifying.
The Shapeshifter / Ancient Sins, Gravity Falls. Gravity Falls is a show that is riddled with dark and disturbing themes and imagery that flies right in the face of the pure family-friendly image that Disney projects. I mean, in the finale, Bill's cipher straight up states that he's going to turn the children into corpses.
Not so fast! You two wait here! I've got some children I need to make into corpses! When I get my hands on you kids, I'm gonna disassemble your molecules! You've tricked me for the last time!
Yikes. While there were many disturbing moments throughout the series, two in particular take the cake. The first comes to us from the second episode of the second season, titled Into the Bunker. In this episode, Dipper's mysterious journal leads the group to a hidden underground bunker, where they encounter a horrifying creature, the Shapeshifter. As evidenced by its name, this is a creature that can take the form of whatever it wants. This creature was foreshadowed in Season 1 in the form of a warning in Dipper's journal. Well, that warning was not meant to be taken lightly, as this is an extremely dangerous and vicious foe. Also, it's voiced by Mark Hamill, the king of animated villain voices, so you just know it's gonna screw with you.
Should I be one or the other? How about both?
This form might even be more disgusting than its true form, a pale, slimy insect with deformed limbs.
You will never find the author. If you keep digging, you'll meet a fate worse than you can imagine. And this will be the last form you ever take!
Good luck sleeping tonight.
Our second moment comes from the episode Northwest Mansion Mystery, in which Pacifica Northwest enlists Dipper's help to get rid of a ghost that intends on wrecking the party they're hosting. Sounds like a simple little plot on paper, until the ghost actually shows up. First, blood begins oozing from all the severed animal heads on the wall. Yes, actual blood in a Disney show. The animal heads then begin chanting ancient sins over and over as the ghost crawls out of the fire. And to make matters worse, the only advice Dipper's journal has is pray for mercy.
No! No, someone help! Someone help!
Knuckles' hallucination, the cat, Flapjack's nightmare, and the end of the world. The Marvelous Misadventures of Flapjack. The Marvelous Misadventures of Flapjack is a show that takes pleasure in making its audience uncomfortable and grossed out. From its constant use of hyper-realistic close-ups and the unsettling dark humor, it seems like the show was just made for this list. First comes the episode Knuckles and His Hilarious Problem, where Knuckles is revealed to be a candy-holic, which makes him act drunk. At his lowest point, he goes through a hallucination that's more than just a little fucked up. Knuckles is tied to a raft in the ocean, as Peppermint Larry and Dr. Barber eerily inform him the only solution to his problem is candy surgery.
It's okay, Captain. You're safe now. Here with us, we are Candied Island. So are you. We're all whirling in a candy cosmos.
He then sticks his peppermint arms down his throat and vomits candy into Knuckles' mouth. Next, we'll be looking at the cat from the episode Who Let the Cats Out of the Old Bag's House. Flapjack comes across a seemingly normal cat who he begins to play with. Then we see what this cat looks like up close and personal.
I think I know what you want. String!
Yeah, that's not a nice image. Its soulless eye sockets and barracuda-like teeth are never acknowledged. They're just there. Next is Flapjack's nightmare from the episode Tee-Hee Tummy Tums. In this scene, Flapjack has a nightmare about meeting someone called the Comb Stranger, who gives combs in exchange for candy.
Yes, really? That way!
Okay!
The exchange between the two is pleasant enough at first, with Flapjack thrilled to be receiving a free comb. The mood quickly changes once the Comb Stranger states it's for getting bugs out of his hair.
Oh, this is too much!
You'll need it to get the bugs out of your hair.
Thankfully, the real Comb Stranger in the episode is nothing like that, but you just don't forget something like that. Lastly, we'll be looking at the end of the world from the episode How the West Was Fun. In this episode, Flapjack and Knuckles head west for the first time, believing that the mythical Candied Island lies in that direction. After suffering through many hardships, the two become so dehydrated that they must drink seawater, creating a nightmare-like hallucination world where they see Candied Island, but it melts into a burning hellscape. The whole world becomes as red and black as a Virtual Boy, while the two desperately try to get away from the now growing hole that Candied Island melted into. They find themselves in the bathtub of a sea monster, who splashes them into a whirlpool.
Man the cells, boy.
If you know what's good for you.
There sure are a lot of terrifying hallucinations and dreams in the show, aren't there?
Return the slab. You're not perfect. Fred. Courage the Cowardly Dog. Let's just jump straight into this one. You all knew that Courage the Cowardly Dog would appear in some way, shape, and or form on this list. It seems its entire reason for existing was simply to scar children, and it did such a good job at that, you can probably think of at least 10 moments that left you sleep deprived at school the next day. The first is the infamous quote, "Return the slab," from King Ramses' curse. In this episode, Courage finds an ancient Egyptian slab from their farmhouse that's worth $1 million. Eustace refuses to return it to the tomb it came from though, and the family must face the wrath of the curse it brings.
Return the slab, or suffer my curse. This night you will be visited by 3 plagues, each worse than the last. Return the slab.
Unlike the rest of the show, which is done in 2D animation, the Ghost of Ramses is a rather stilted full 3D model, giving it an otherworldly and frightening appearance. Given that the episode aired in 2000, the TV CGI wasn't what we know now, so the models were slightly more clunky and uncanny. If anything, that just adds to the disturbing nature. There's just something about old 3D models that's terrifying. And speaking of old 3D models, our next entry comes from the series finale, Perfect. This episode has an evil school teacher named the Perfectionist to come and try and make Courage perfect. Only Courage can see her, implying that she's part of his imagination. Courage undergoes a good amount of stress trying to be perfect, and soon finds that he can't sleep without nightmares of imperfection. Specifically, this one.
You're not perfect.
Understandably, this scares the shit out of Courage, and he decides that maybe sleep isn't the best idea right now. This thing just comes out of nowhere with its clashing animation style, abstract design, baggy eyes, and soft whispering voice. There's a sense of sadness to it, like this creature knows something that Courage doesn't. Maybe he's not perfect either. Who knows? Luckily, we don't have to dwell on that because we have yet another fucked up moment to attend to. The last moment comes from the episode Freaky Fred. In this episode, we meet Eustace and Muriel's nephew, Fred, a barber with a big, toothy smile. Fred likes to speak in rhyme and shave people against their will. In fact, he's absolutely obsessed with it. When he pins down Courage and shaves him, a disturbing children's lullaby plays, giving the whole scene a serial killer-esque vibe. In fact, Fred's entire character seems like a child-friendly way to showcase the dangers of a murderer or rapist. Someone who can't control their compulsive behavior and give in, despite who it hurts around them. He seems to feel no regret afterward, which gives off a sociopathic vibe. All in all, Courage the Cowardly Dog made its name on disturbing moments. It's only right that we honor the ones that fucked with us the most.
The Vampire, the Swimming Pool Zombie, and the Ghastly Grinner. Are you afraid of the dark? Just like with Goosebumps, it should come as no surprise that there is some seriously fucked up stuff in the show Are You Afraid of the Dark? They're not just dark, they are advanced darkness. The first topic is the vampire from the episode The Tale of the Night Shift. In this episode, various members of a hospital staff are picked off one by a vampire who has taken up residence in the basement. The main protagonist, Amanda, discovers that in order to turn the staff back to normal, she must destroy the vampire's coffin. It turns out one of the new volunteers, Margaret, is the vampire. She reveals her true form, turning from a young redhead into a green-skinned, demonic man with sharp yellow teeth, blood-red eyes, and thinning white hair.
No. The old-fashioned way is best.
Luckily, they defeat him by burning his coffin, causing him to spontaneously combust and flail around desperately, before throwing himself off the roof of the hospital to end his suffering. Next is the infamous swimming pool zombie, from the Tale of the Dead Man's Float. The episode begins with a young boy being dragged underwater and drowned by an unseen force in his school's swimming pool. It turns out that the pool is built on top of, you guessed it, a cemetery. They forgot one of the bodies when transferring the graves, and now he's out for blood.
It's...
The appearance of the pool zombie is disgusting, with its exposed red flesh and partially decomposed body sitting in the water. The thought of being grabbed and pulled underwater by such a creature is a horrifying thought, struggling and kicking as you desperately hold your breath. But no matter what you do, you can't seem to break free, and things begin to get dim. The last thing you would see is that skeletal face pulling you down. The last noteworthy moment is the ghastly grinner, from the aptly named The Tale of the Ghastly Grinner. The Grinner was created as a comic book character initially, but was able to come to life through strange methods involving microwaving the comic. It's not really clear how it works. The Grinner is a psychotic killer clown who imprisoned his creator, who is in the process of writing an issue where he dies. Now in the real world, his goal is to victimize and torture as many people as possible, just for fun.
What's the matter, kids? Can't think of
He feeds off their emotion and causes them to go insane, leaving them a brainless, laughing, drooling mess. The character is very much like the Joker from Batman, but in a more supernatural way. While the Joker manages to be both funny and scary, the Grinner is just simply scary. But man, he is good at that.
I'll leave you with a
Thankfully, at the end of the episode, the clown is sealed away in the comic world and got his face erased, so we won't be seeing any more of that nightmarish smile.
Ren contemplates murder, Ren describes murdering Stimpy, and Ren is happy. From Ren and Stimpy. Holy shit. This is it, the top dog of disturbing, the peak of dark moments, the absolute king of fucked up shit in a kid's show. Ren from Ren and Stimpy. Just Ren, he's the moment. Ren is pretty sadistic, abusive, vain, and mentally unstable, often going through violent outbursts that involve trying to murder Stimpy and others. In the episode Stimpy's Fan Club, the two of them receive piles and piles of fan mail, all for Stimpy. Ren becomes increasingly jealous, eventually losing his mind. He regards his hands as dirty due to replying to hundreds and hundreds of Stimpy's fan mail, essentially lying to children in his opinion. He states how easy it would be to end this farce with his dirty hands as he hovers over a sleeping Stimpy.
And with these hands, I hope the fate of millions. Just one quick twist, and it's over.
Slowly inching towards him before his brain begins to sting, causing him to scream as the fires of hell rise up and consume him. Luckily, Stimpy never learned of Ren's attempted murder. Well, for that instance. In the episode Svien Hoek, Ren's cousin Svien messes with all of his stuff, causing him to lash out at Svien and Stimpy, threatening them with all the ways he's going to torture them.
Oh, what I'm gonna do to you. First, I'm gonna tear your lips out. Yeah, that's what I'm gonna do. And then, I'm gonna gouge your eyes out.
And what really makes this scene terrifying is how calm Rem is throughout the entire thing, speaking slowly with a little bit of a smile on his face. It really shows how sadistic he is.
Next, I'm gonna tear your arms out of the sockets.
He goes to take a whiz before he acts on it. And luckily the episode ends after he gets electrocuted by whizzing on their favorite board game, Don't Whiz on the Electronic Fence. All's well that ends well, I suppose. Finally, even Stimpy realizes how unhappy and disturbed Ren is, and tries to help him out. In the episode Stimpy's Invention, Stimpy creates the Happy Helmet, which is meant to control Ren's emotions and keep him happy all the time.
Hey, what's happening to me? No, got to fight it. Stimpy, I'm so happy. I must go do nice things.
This brings on one of the most well-known scenes of the entire series, Happy Happy Joy Joy. As Stimpy plays his favorite song for Ren, it's obvious that he's still in pain and desperately wants to take the helmet off.
See how I love to clean filthy cat boxes.
He finds a hammer and begins to bash his own head in and be with the music while smiling. With the helmet now off, Ren grabs Stimpy by the neck, more angry than he's ever been before. Luckily, he realizes that he loves being angry and thanks Stimpy for helping him realize that. It's pretty amazing how much the show got away with, to be honest. It boggles my mind. It's hard to tell where the line was drawn with the show, but there most certainly was one, as they felt the need to make an adult-oriented spin-off titled Ren and Stimpy Adult Party Cartoon. Regardless, Ren and Stimpy, in my opinion, is one fucked up show.